Good morning and God bless you. Thank you for joining me reading my granddaddy's Bible. Today is January 20th, Saturday, the end of week 3, 2024. Today we'll be reading chapter 13 in Exodus. The Paschal solemnity is to be observed, and the firstborn are to be consecrated to God. The people are conducted through the desert by a pillar of fire in the night and a cloud in the day. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me every firstborn that openeth the womb among the children of Israel, as well of men as of beasts, for they are all mine. And Moses said to the people, Remember this day in which you came forth out of Egypt, and out of the house of bondage. For with a strong hand hath the Lord brought you forth out of this place, that you eat no leavened bread. This day you go forth in the month of new corn. And when the Lord shall have brought thee into the land of the Canaanite, and the Hethite, and the Amorite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, which he swore to thy fathers that he would give thee, a land that floweth with milk and honey, thou shalt celebrate this manner of sacred rites in this month. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day shall be solemnity, and the seventh day shall be the solemnity of the Lord. Unleavened bread shall you eat 7 days. There shall not be seen anything leavened with thee, nor in all thy coasts. And thou shalt tell thy son in that day, saying, This is what the Lord did to me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be as a sign in thy hand, as a memorial before the eyes, and that the law of the Lord be always in thy month. For with a strong hand the Lord hath brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Thou shalt keep this observance at the set time from days to days. And when the Lord shall have brought thee into the land of the Canaanite, as he swore to thee and thy fathers, and shall give it thee, thou shalt set apart all that openeth the womb for the Lord, and all that is the first brought forth of thy cattle. Whatsoever thou shalt have of the male sex, thou shalt consecrate to the Lord. The firstborn of an ass thou shalt change for a sheep. And if thou do not redeem it, and thou shalt kill it. And if thou do not redeem it, thou shalt kill it. And every firstborn of men thou shalt redeem with a price. And when thy son shall ask thee tomorrow, saying, What is this? Thou shalt answer him, With a strong hand did the Lord bring us forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For when Pharao was hardened, and would not let us go to the Lord, for when Pharaoh was hardened and would not let us go, the Lord slew every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of man to the firstborn of beasts. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that openeth the womb of the male sex, and all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. And it shall be as a sign in thy hand, and as a thing hung between the eyes, for a remembrance, because the Lord hath brought us forth out of Egypt by a strong hand. And when Pharaoh had sent out the people, the Lord led them not by the way of the land of the Philistines, which is near, thinking lest perhaps they would repent, if they should see wars arise against them, and would return to Egypt. But he led them about by the way of the desert, which is by the Red Sea, And the children of Israel went up armed out of the land of Egypt. And Moses took Joseph's bones with him, because he had adjured the children of Israel, saying, God shall visit you. Carry out my bones from hence with you. And marching from Succoth, they encamped in Etham, in the utmost coasts of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them, to shew the way by day in a pillar of a cloud, and by night in a pillar of fire, that he might be the guide of their journey at both times. There never failed the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night. Chapter 14. Pharaoh pursueth the children of Israel. They murmur against Moses, but are encouraged by him, and pass through the Red Sea. Pharaoh and his army following them are drowned. And the Lord spoke to Moses, Speak to the children of Israel. Let them turn and encamp over against the Philaroth, which is between Magdol and the sea, over against Beelzephon. You shall encamp before it upon the sea. And Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are straitened in the land. The desert has shut them in, and I shall harden his heart, and he will pursue you. And I shall be glorified in Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And they did so, and it was told the king of the Egyptians that the people was fled. And the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was changed with regard to the people. And they said, What meant we to do this, that we let Israel go from serving us? So he made ready his chariot, and took all his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots that were in Egypt, and the captains of the whole army. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. But they were gone forth in a mighty hand. And when the Egyptians followed the steps of them, who were gone before, they found them encamped at the seaside. And when the Egyptians followed the steps of them who were gone before, they found them encamped at the seaside. All Pharaoh's horses and chariots and the whole army were in Phinharoth before Beelzephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel, lifting up their eyes, saw the Egyptians behind them, and they feared exceedingly, and cried to the Lord. And they said to Moses, Perhaps there were no graves in Egypt, therefore thou hast brought us to die in the wilderness. Why wouldst thou do this to lead us out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we spoke to thee in Egypt, saying, Depart from us, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it was much better to serve them than to die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, Fear not. Stand and see the great wonders of the Lord, which he will do this day. For the Egyptians, whom you see now, you shall see no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, Why criest thou to me? Speak to the children of Israel to go forward. But lift thou up thy rod, and stretch forth thy hand over the sea, and divide it, and the children of Israel may go through the midst of the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the heart of the Egyptians to pursue you, and I will be glorified in Pharaoh, and in all his hosts, and in his chariots, and in his horsemen, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I shall be glorified in Pharaoh, and in his chariots, and in his horsemen. And the angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, removing, went behind them, and together with him the pillar of the cloud, leaving the forepart, stood behind between the Egyptians' camp and the camp of Israel. And it was a dark cloud, and the enlightening, and the night, so they could not come at one another all the night. And when Moses had stretched forth his hand over the sea, the Lord took it away by a strong and burning wind, blowing all the night, and it turned it into dry ground, and the water was divided. And the children of Israel went in through the midst of the sea, dried up, for the water was as a wall on their left, or on their right hand, and on their left. And the Egyptians, pursuing, went in after them, and all the Pharaoh's horses, his chariots and horsemen, through the midst of the sea. And now the morning was come, and behold, the Lord, looking upon the Egyptian army through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, slew their host, and overthrew the wheels of the chariots, and they were carried into the deep. And the Egyptians said, Let us flee from Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against us. And the Lord said to Moses, Stretch forth thy hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and horsemen. And when Moses had stretched forth his hand towards the sea, it returned at the first break of day to the former place. And as the Egyptians were fleeing away, the waters came upon them, and the Lord shut them up in the middle of the waves. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen of all the army of Pharaoh, who had come into the sea after them. Neither did there so much as one of them remain. But the children of Israel marched through the midst of the sea upon dry land, and the waters were to them as a wall on the right hand and on the left. And the Lord delivered Israel on that day out of the hands of the Egyptians. And they saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore, and the mighty hand that the Lord had used against them. And the people feared the Lord, and they believed the Lord and Moses his servant. Chapter 15. The canticle of Moses. The bitter waters of Marah are made sweet. Then Moses and the children of Israel sung this canticle to the Lord, and said, Let us sing to the Lord, for he is gloriously magnified. The horse and the rider he hath thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my praise, and he is become salvation to me. He is my God, and I will glorify him, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war, almighty is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he hath cast into the sea. His chosen captains are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them, they are sunk to the bottom like a stone. The right hand, O Lord, is magnified in strength. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath slain the enemy. And in the multitude of thy glory thou hast put down thy adversaries. Thou hast sent thy wrath, which hath devoured them like stubble. And with the blasts of thy anger the waters were gathered together, the flowing waters stood, the depths were gathered together in the midst of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue and overtake, I will divide the spoils, my soul shall have its fill. I will draw my sword, my hand shall slay them. The wind blew and the sea covered them, they sunk as lead in the mighty waters. Who is like to thee among the strong, O Lord? Who is like to thee, glorious in holiness, terrible and praiseworthy, doing wonders? Thou stretchest forth thy hand, and the earth swallowed them. In thy mercy thou hast been a leader to the people, which thou hast redeemed, and in thy strength thou hast carried them to thy holy habitation. Nations rose up and were angry. Sorrows took hold on the inhabitants of Philistim. Then were the princes of Edom troubled. Trembling seized on the stout men of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan became stiff. Let fear and dread fall upon them in the greatness of thy arm. Let them become unmovable as a stone until thy people, O Lord, pass by, until this thy people pass by, which thou hast possessed. Thou shalt bring them in and plant them in the mountain of thy inheritance, in thy most firm habitation, which thou hast made, O Lord, is thy sanctuary. O Lord, which thy hands have established. The Lord shall reign for ever and ever. For Pharaoh went in on horseback with his chariots and horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought back upon them the waters of the sea. But the children of Israel walked on dry ground in the midst thereof. So Mary, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went forth after her, with timbrels and with dances. And she began the song to them, saying, Let us sing to the Lord, for he is gloriously magnified. The horse and his rider he hath thrown into the sea. And Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went forth into the wilderness of Sur. And they marched 3 days through the wilderness and found no water. And they came to Marah, and they could not drink the waters of Marah, because they were bitter. Whereupon he gave a name also agreeable to the place, calling it Marah, that is, bitterness. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? But he cried to the Lord, and he showed him a tree, which, when he had cast into the waters, they were turned into sweetness. There he appointed him ordinances and judgments, and there he proved him, saying, If thou wilt hear the voice of the Lord thy God, and do what is right before him, and obey his commandments, and keep all his precepts, none of the evils that I laid upon Egypt I will bring upon thee. For I am the Lord the healer, thy healer. And the children of Israel came into Elim, where there were 12 fountains of water, and 70 palm trees, and they encamped by the waters. We'll conclude this, our reading for today, in my granddaddy's Holy Bible. It is a Douay-Rheims version. It's printed in Belgium in 1914. I hope you're enjoying reading this with me, and I hope this encourages you also to choose your version of the Holy Bible, whichever one you like, and to read as well the Bible in a year, or just read along with me. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Saturday, and enjoy Mass or service tomorrow at your church locally if you can. If not, there are also so many churches that are online now. You can always see a service or a Mass online. I know Heart of the Nation is a good service for Catholic Mass online and on TV, and there are numerous Protestant churches that have their service broadcast on their websites. You can just look one up in your area. Thank you for joining me. May God bless you. Have a wonderful week 4 of 2024. And keep praying for our nation and our leaders.